Right, here I am, Andy XL, back with another NFXL podcast. Recently, I've done three pieces looking at 2026 draft classes. Now, that is my undoubted area of expertise. And I'll say it again, and if anybody's tuning into these podcasts, keep tuned to me for the 2026 draft. Over the last 3 years, I've been as accurate, if not more accurate, than anybody else out there in the ether, as it were, on the web, etc. Any podcast, any list you want to look at, I've been at least as accurate, if not more accurate, in predicting who goes in what round of the NFL draft than anybody else out there, including the likes of Daniel Jeremiah and anybody else you want to name. So if you want to know about the 2026 draft, keep tuned to those ones. But right now, I'm going to go away from the draft and I'm going to go back to the current NFL. And after week one, and I'm going to do this every week, I'm going to have a good week, bad week. Which teams had a good week, which teams had a bad week. So let's get into it. Week one done and dusted. So as I say, which teams come out of week one with smiles on their faces, and which ones look about as happy as Bill Cowher on a bad day? Any team, any team that does not get a mention here will be because I did not see their win or loss as significant in terms of how it affects their season hopes. By definition, any team that had a win has had a good week, and any team that had a loss has not had a good week, has probably had a bad week. But these are the teams I felt had a very good or better week, or a very bad or worse one. So let's start with the positives. The good week, guys. Start at number one with the Green Bay Packers. Having made the significant splash trade to bring Micah Parsons to Lambeau, a loss at home to the Lions would have burst the bubble of optimism that has been brought to the Packers preseason outlook by that Parsons acquisition. But after such a resounding victory, that bubble has become a balloon and gives them a valuable division win over the reigning divisional champions. Now they prepare to welcome the Commanders to what will be a Lambeau full of excitement and expectation for a Thursday night football game in week two. Win that one, and they could be set to go to 4-0 as they then travel to play the Browns before Parsons gets to go back to Dallas in week four. So week two becomes as huge as week one was for them. A week two win, and their balloon will rise to stratospheric levels of belief, both in the locker room and across Packer Nation. So they were number one on my list of good week. Number two, the Los Angeles Chargers. Similarly, the Chargers week one over the Chiefs not only gives them an early potentially huge edge in the battle for the divisional title in the AFC West, but also fills them with belief that they can not only take the division, but compete to win it all this season. Now they need to back it up, though. That big win on the road, they need to back up that big win on the road by going to Vegas and at home to the Broncos. If they can do so, they will have the lead of the division and at least a share of the tiebreak against all of their divisional rivals. They've got three divisional matches right off the bat. They win, they win all three, then they're in a good position. Sorry, take that back. It's not in division. Um, so if they do back up that opening win with two more, they would put themselves in an exceptional position. But that opening win over the Chiefs is going to fill them full of belief. Number three, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills edged the victory over the Ravens in what will be one of their toughest assignments this regular season, and with the rest of their division looking distinctly subpar, wins like this make their almost certain retention of the AFC title all but a done deal already after week one. You can almost crown them. This was a bit of a Josh Allen masterclass again, and will both boost his team's prospects and gives him an early edge in the MVP race. Um, Longer term, talking post-season, they've achieved results like this before, only to fail come the post-season. So they now need to show that they have a championship level running game and defense as the season progresses. As Allen, brilliant as he is and can be, cannot operate at that level every week. They can't ask him to do it every week. And they did benefit from Derrick Henry fumble in that game too, but I'm not going to make it. I think it was more about Allen than that. But that's how I see the Bills. But good, certainly a very good week one for them, as did the Los Angeles Rams. Had a very good win. It was a scrappy win, typical of a few we saw in week one. It was far from perfect for the Rams, but it was over a good team in the Texans and gives the Rams a win that will help build their confidence and belief levels. Now they must follow it up, though, with a win at Tennessee in week 2. Failure to win that one would undo all the good work they've done in week 1. 5 on this list, the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders' road win in New England in a meeting between two of the most improved rosters in the league gets them a start that will increase their belief that they can make a run at reaching the postseason out of the uber tough AFC West. The Brock Bowers injury he picked up in that game is a huge concern, though, and they will need positive news on that front for them to truly turn hope into expectation. Especially as in week 2 they host the Chargers, who had their own big win in week 1. If the Raiders are to be able to be this year's team to surprise many, a bit like Denver last year, this is the sort of game they need to win. Losing to the Chargers would not be terrible, but getting a win would be huge. So this is almost a free hit for the Raiders in week 2. That's how I see it anyway. Right, the final team I've got is having a good week. The Indianapolis Colts. Colts may have taken advantage of a Dolphins team that looks to be in complete disarray, but this was a huge confidence building win for them, and most of all for and in Daniel Jones. With AFC South champs Houston having lost in week 1, the Colts and indeed the Jags have put themselves firmly in the race for the division title in these very embryonic stages. But now welcome the tough Broncos defense to Indy in week 2. If they could win that one, then win at Tennessee in week 3, they could establish themselves as the ones to catch in this division. Lots of ifs there, but it's there for the Colts now. They can push on if they can push on. They're going to put themselves in a great position. So they're a good week, guys. Right. Who had a bad week? Well, let's flip it straight round from the Colts. Worst week of all, Miami Dolphins. Apart from the late meaningless consolation touchdown, this was a truly disastrous start to the season for the Dolphins. Pre-season, this looked and sounded like a team full of discontent and disharmony, and they looked just like that team in this humiliation against the Colts. And now they head to Detroit, and that could get really ugly if they do not get themselves together and quickly. Pre-season, I tipped Mike McDaniel to be the first head coach to get fired. And given the disarray and apparent lack of morale shown in week 1, his seat is already getting to be a pretty hot one. Now, I mentioned they're going to the Detroit Lions. They're the second team on the bad week list. Flip everything I said about the Packers earlier and look at the opposite for the Lions. On paper, a loss in Lambeau is far from terrible, but it was the way they lost and the underlying reasons that could be a bigger concern here. Jared Goff has a poor record of personal performance at Lambeau, and this was another dud from him in that regard. But the lack of offense generally puts the new offensive coordinator in the spotlight, and until his offense fires like it has in recent seasons, then he will come under greater and greater scrutiny. And the same has to be said of the reformed O-line. Post Frank Ragnar's retirement, this unit neither gave Goff the required levels of protection or allowed Sonic and Knuckles to be the force they have been in previous seasons. Those two combined for just 44 rushing yards in this game. And the Lions need those two to be 100 plus from that pairing to win games like this. Added to that, the secondary still looked flaky and gave up avoidable big plays. As I say, it is the manner of this defeat rather than the defeat itself that's worrying for Detroit. They now have 2 easier home games against the Bears and Browns, either side of a tough trip to Baltimore, making the home games against the Bears and Browns pretty much must win for them now. And if they can fire on offense against the Bears, that might give them some renewed confidence for that big game with the Ravens. But they're behind the 8 ball early, and they need to pick themselves up. Number 3, in bad week, Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Chargers needed the week 1 win more than the Chiefs, simply because the Chiefs know they can win divisional titles and compete in the postseason. So they won't be panicking over a narrow loss in week 1, particularly considering they had injuries that affected them, and will know they can improve as and when they get the receiver core up to full strength. The injury to Xavier Worthy is another blow in that regard, though, which is going to make life harder for Mahomes and co in the shorter term going forward. This loss does put them in the position of chaser rather than being chased. And that is against all three divisional rivals who all won in week one in what clearly looks to be the toughest division in the AFC this season. You don't want to be chasing three teams, and that's where they are right now. So the Arrowhead season opening Super Bowl rematch against the Eagles becomes even bigger, if it could be any bigger, for them now, as they would not want to fall further behind in such a tough division. Number 4 in the bad week, the Carolina Panthers. Again, it's not the defeat to the Jags that was bad, it was the style of it. The Panthers looked suspect in all areas offensively and defensively in this one, and opposite to some of those winners I mentioned earlier, this could be a real dent to a team that must have had modest expectations for this season before this loss. So the modest expectations might have completely disappeared after this one. The morale got to have taken a hit there. With games against the Cardinals and Falcons up next, then 3 more games against teams that are unlikely to make the postseason, they must play better and get at least 2 or 3 wins from their next 5 to avoid their season spiraling badly. Ironically, the play better part of that equation is probably more important than the wins for a team that surely has little or no postseason aspirations this term, but would like to see they have something to build on for the long term. So what I'm saying there is they need to show up. They didn't show up in week one at all against the Jags. They need to show up and show they've got something. Otherwise, it's like, all right, let's throw it in the bin and start over. Right, Cleveland Browns are the next team up. Now, the Browns will be shaking their heads at not winning in week one and kicking themselves for not beating the Bengals. Well, apart from their own kicker, who probably missed kicking himself on the evidence of that performance. They would have hoped rather than expected to win this game before it was played, but given how they could so easily have won, having played the game, how they react to this loss will be huge for what they can achieve going forward. In truth, they should congratulate themselves on deserving to beat a good team, blame the kicker, and move on with increased belief. But a loss is a loss is a loss. And yikes, look at their next 3 games. The Ravens, Packers and Lions. So 0-4 could be upon them before they know it unless they can take the positives from their week 1 loss and pull off a surprise win against one of their next 3 opponents. Right, 6th on this list, the Houston Texans. The Texans are another team that get on this list not because they lost to the Rams, but because their biggest issue from last season came back to haunt them in this one. Their own line completely failed to cope with a quality pass rushing unit of the Rams, and if the Texans are to have any hope of being competitive come the postseason, that has to change. Now, the fact I'm still talking about their postseason chances tells you that they still need not panic about getting to the postseason from the AFC South. But that O-line will firstly need to stand up against the Bucks pass rush in week 2 before what becomes a bigger game against the Jags in week 3. Now they are a game behind them in the division. Lose to the Jags there and they're putting themselves in a hard spot in that division. Somehow they're going to need to sort that O-line out before the trade line deadline as soon as possible. Better sooner than that if they can, obviously, if they are to have any hope of being more than divisional winners at best. Right, some other teams I want to give a quick mention to. Pittsburgh Steelers win over the Jets, saw an excellent performance from Aaron Rodgers. Must renew hope for the Steelers. And let's not overlook the continued excellence of kicker Chris Boswell, who ultimately kicked them over the line in this one. Honourable mention to Justin Fields here too on a losing side. He played really well. Neither of these teams got onto my main list as I ultimately feel this was a game between 2 moderate teams and the outcome does not fundamentally change their season outlook for me. Despite a scratchy performance, the results also make this a good week for the Bucks. They were the only team to win in the NFC South in week 1 and now have at least a share of the head-to-head tiebreaker with their most likely divisional challenger, the Falcons. The New York Jets. Now, on the negative here, I warned you about the O-line and what a pummeling the quarterback for the Giants was going to take, and that is what came to pass in week 1. All the talk is going to be about Russell Wilson and will he start, will they bench him, or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's that O-line. I'm telling you, it's the O-line. A aside from the quarterback pummeling, they also prevented them from having any sort of ground game. Another long season of pain for all Giants, and particularly their quarterbacks, lie ahead. Although it could be argued a more mobile one like Jackson Dart may at least be able to dodge some of the bullets if you want to put a young quarterback in front of a firing squad, that is. But sort that O-line out, Giants. How long have I been saying it? Look at what Daniel Jones did in Indianapolis. I know it's only 1 week, but give him a decent O-line. Look at how much better he was than the awful pounding he took in for the Giants. Right, some very early power rankings now. I'm not going to bother with a full list until we've seen 5 weeks of action, but here are my early top 6 to win it all and my bottom 6 to compete for early draft picks in 26. My top 6: the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 1, Buffalo Bills 2, Baltimore Ravens 3, Philadelphia Eagles 4, Los Angeles Chargers 5, and the Green Bay Packers at 6. Sum that up, despite a patchy week 1 showing, I'm sticking with the Bucks as they have some injury issues ahead of this one, but still managed to win it. And when they get their secondary healthy, Chris Godwin back, they still look for me to have the best all-round roster in the league. The Bills jump ahead of the Ravens, courtesy of beating them in week 1. The Eagles may not be as good as last season, but will still contend. The Chargers could not have done more in week 1, and the same could be said of the Packers as they both climb into my top 6. Down to the bottom. So starting at the bottom, 32 the New York Giants, 31 the Cleveland Browns, 30 the Tennessee Titans, 29 the Carolina Panthers, 28 the Miami Dolphins, and 27 the New York Jets. That might be a bit harsh on the Jets being in this list after a good week 1 performance in defeat, but they did actually climb 3 places up my list as a result, despite the loss. The Dolphins are all at sea. The Panthers look tired, toothless. The Titans are at the start of a long rebuild, and the Browns found a way to lose again. But the Giants are certainly that in name only. So there you go. That's my look at week 1 and where we stand. So I'll be back next looking with another look at some draft classes for 2026, and I'll also preview week 2. That'll probably come out on Thursday before the Thursday night game. So stay tuned.